Throughout history, every generation has asked the same question. If evil grows stronger, what hope remains for the righteous? It's a question that has echoed through wars, empires, persecution, and times of uncertainty. For many people, the answer is found in the pages of Scripture, but hidden within one of the oldest Jewish writings ever discovered is another remarkable promise. A promise that has fascinated readers for more than 2,000 years. The Book of Enoch repeatedly describes a group of people it calls the elect. They are opposed. They are mocked. They suffer injustice. Yet again and again, the book insists they will not ultimately be overcome. Why? What makes them different? And perhaps the biggest question of all: who are they? Today, we're going to investigate one of the Book of Enoch's most powerful themes. Not by repeating internet theories, and not by reading later ideas back into the text. Instead, we'll examine what the Book of Enoch actually says, how ancient Jewish readers understood it, and why its message still resonates today. Because if Enoch is right, the greatest protection isn't found in strength, or wealth, or power. It's found somewhere entirely unexpected. Before we can understand who the elect are, we first need to understand the book that speaks about them. The Book of Enoch is one of the most influential Jewish writings outside the traditional biblical canon. For centuries, many believed it had disappeared forever. Then, fragments of the same book were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, written in Aramaic, copied centuries before the birth of Jesus. These discoveries confirmed that the Book of Enoch wasn't a medieval invention. It was already being read by Jewish communities during the Second Temple period. And among its most remarkable themes is the repeated promise that God knows those who belong to Him. Again and again, the book contrasts two groups: the righteous and the wicked, those who trust God and those who reject Him, those who pursue justice and those who embrace violence. This contrast appears from the opening chapters. One of the first promises Enoch records says, "The righteous shall have peace. Upon them shall come blessing and mercy, and they shall all belong to God." Notice something remarkable. The promise isn't that the righteous will never face hardship. The promise is that they belong to God. That distinction changes everything. Because throughout the Book of Enoch, the righteous are often surrounded by corruption. Yet the outcome is never in doubt. God sees them. God knows them. And in His appointed time, God vindicates them. This raises another question. If the righteous still experience suffering, in what sense are they protected? The answer begins with one of the most important titles in the entire book: the elect. The word elect appears repeatedly throughout the Book of Enoch. But unlike many modern discussions, the book never treats the title as a badge of superiority. Instead, it describes a relationship. Throughout the parables of Enoch, the elect are portrayed as those who remain faithful to God while living in a world increasingly defined by injustice. They are not described as the strongest, or the wealthiest, or the most influential. In fact, many of them suffer because they refuse to abandon righteousness. Again and again, Enoch contrasts two paths. One follows power. The other follows the truth. One seeks temporary gain. The other remains faithful, even when faithfulness comes at a cost. This theme reaches its climax when Enoch introduces a mysterious figure known as the Elect One. Unlike the elect people, the Elect One is presented as God's chosen ruler and judge. He is associated with righteousness, justice, and the final defeat of evil. Many Christian readers have seen remarkable parallels between this figure and the Messiah described in the New Testament. Jewish scholars, however, often understand these passages within the context of Second Temple Jewish expectations about God's coming judgment. Whatever conclusion one reaches, one thing is clear. The hope of the righteous is never placed in themselves. It is placed in God's promise to establish justice. That distinction matters, because it answers one of the biggest misunderstandings about the Book of Enoch. The elect are not protected because they are stronger than everyone else. They are protected because they belong to the one who is stronger than evil itself. But that creates another question. If they belong to God, why does the Book of Enoch repeatedly describe them as suffering? Why aren't they simply spared from hardship altogether? To answer that, we must examine one of the most surprising themes in the entire book. The righteous are protected, yet they are not promised an easy life. If the elect belongs to God, why do they suffer at all? It's one of the oldest questions in human history. And surprisingly, the Book of Enoch doesn't avoid it. It confronts it head-on. Throughout its pages, the righteous are never portrayed as living easy lives. Instead, they often find themselves surrounded by corruption, violence, oppression, and people who seem to prosper by doing evil. At first, that feels like a contradiction. If God knows the righteous, why doesn't he simply remove their suffering? The answer begins to emerge as Enoch's visions unfold. Again and again, the book reminds its readers that history has not yet reached its conclusion. The present age is not the final chapter. In one of its most powerful themes, Enoch describes the wicked as appearing successful, but only for a time. Their power seems permanent. Their influence appears unstoppable. Yet beneath the surface, the story is already moving toward judgment. The righteous, meanwhile, are called to something far more difficult. Not revenge, not retaliation, but endurance. This idea wasn't unique to Enoch. Centuries later, Jesus would tell his disciples, "He who endures to the end shall be saved." The Apostle Peter would write to believers facing persecution, reminding them that trials refine faith like fire refines gold. The message is remarkably consistent. Faithfulness is often tested before it is vindicated. That changes how we read the Book of Enoch. The promise is never, "Nothing bad will happen to you." The promise is, evil will not have the final word. That distinction matters, because throughout history, many faithful people have suffered. The prophets suffered. The apostles suffered. Even Jesus himself suffered. Suffering was never presented as evidence that God had abandoned them. Quite the opposite. It often became the very place where faith was revealed most clearly. Perhaps that's why Enoch keeps returning to the same theme. The righteous are not defined by what happens to them. They are defined by whom they remain faithful to. But if endurance is the calling of the elect, then another question naturally follows. How does evil keep trying to overcome them? And according to Enoch, why does it always fail in the end? By now, a pattern has begun to emerge. Throughout the Book of Enoch, the righteous suffer. The wicked appear to prosper. And yet, the ending never changes. The righteous endure. The wicked fall. Why? The answer isn't found in human strength. It's found in divine justice. Again and again, Enoch returns to the same promise. There is a day when every hidden act, every injustice, every abuse of power, will be brought into the light. For those who oppressed others, that day is terrifying. For those who remained faithful, it is a day of hope. One of the most remarkable themes in Enoch is that evil is never portrayed as unlimited. It has boundaries. Its influence may seem overwhelming. Its victories may appear permanent. But according to Enoch, its authority is temporary. Even the rebellious watchers, the mighty beings whose actions changed the course of human history, are not beyond judgment. They are restrained. They are held accountable. And they await the day appointed by God. That detail changes everything. Because if even powerful spiritual beings cannot escape God's justice, neither can the kingdoms built on corruption. Throughout history, empires have risen believing they would last forever. Yet every one of them eventually fell. The Book of Enoch reminds us that the greatest illusion of evil is convincing people that it cannot be stopped. But history tells another story. Kingdoms collapse. Tyrants disappear. Injustice is exposed. Power fades. Yet truth endures. Perhaps that is why Enoch repeatedly calls the righteous to patience. Not because justice is absent, but because justice operates on God's timetable. This is one of the hardest lessons in the entire book. We often want immediate answers. Immediate justice. Immediate victory. Enoch points instead to something greater. The certainty that God's justice may be delayed. But it is never forgotten. That raises one final question. If the victory of the righteous is ultimately certain, how should they live while they wait? The answer may be the most practical lesson in the entire Book of Enoch. After all the visions, after all the warnings, after all the descriptions of judgment, the Book of Enoch leaves its readers with one final truth. History belongs to God. Not to kings. Not to empires. Not to the wicked. And not even to the forces of darkness. Throughout the book, the elect are never promised a life free from suffering. They are promised something far greater. That evil does not write the final chapter. Again and again, Enoch points beyond the present age. Beyond corruption. Beyond injustice. Toward a future where righteousness is no longer opposed, but established. This hope echoes throughout the scriptures. The prophet Daniel speaks of a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Jesus tells his followers not to fear those who can kill the body but cannot destroy the soul. The apostle Paul declares that nothing can separate believers from the love of God. Different authors. Different centuries. Yet one consistent message. The victory of the righteous is not based on their own strength. It rests on God's faithfulness. Perhaps. That is why the Book of Enoch has continued to captivate readers for more than 2,000 years. Not because it satisfies every curiosity about the end times, but because it answers a deeper question. When evil appears to be winning, should the righteous lose hope? Enoch's answer is clear. No. Because appearances are not the end of the story. The kingdoms of this world rise and fall. Power changes hands. Generations come and go. But the purposes of God continue. That doesn't mean the journey is easy. It never has been. But according to Enoch, faithfulness is never forgotten. Every act of righteousness. Every quiet act of obedience. Every moment of endurance. None of it is unseen. Perhaps. That is the greatest promise hidden within the Book of Enoch. Not that the righteous escape every trial, but that their lives are held securely in the hands of the one who judges with perfect justice. And that is a hope evil can never take away. So, does the Book of Enoch teach that the elect can never be defeated? The answer depends on what we mean by defeat. The book never promises a life without hardship. It never suggests that the righteous will avoid suffering. In fact, it assumes they will face opposition. But it also insists that suffering is not the end of the story. The victory of the elect is not found in escaping every trial. It is found in remaining faithful until God's justice is revealed. Perhaps that is why this ancient book continues to speak to so many people today. Not because it removes every mystery, but because it reminds us that faithfulness is never wasted. Whether you read the Book of Enoch as sacred scripture, an important work of Second Temple Judaism, or a remarkable piece of ancient literature, its challenge remains the same. In a world where evil often appears loud, will you remain faithful to what is true? Perhaps. That was Enoch's message all along. If this investigation challenged or encouraged you, I want to invite you to become part of the 9th tablet. Every week, we investigate the earliest biblical manuscripts, ancient history, and forgotten texts, not to tell you what to think, but to help you discover what the sources actually say. If that kind of investigation interests you, subscribe and join us for the next chapter. And if you'd like to go even deeper, my ebook, The Watchers and the Flood, explores Genesis 6 and the Book of Enoch in much greater detail. You'll find the link in the description and pinned comment. Until our next investigation, keep searching, keep studying, and let the evidence speak.